The ANC National Policy Conference set to wrap up today. Let's go back now to my colleague Shahan Ramkisoon at the Nasrec Expo Centre. Shahan, a very good morning. We understand you have State Security Minister David Mahlobo with you at the moment.
Yes, Yuveka, thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. And David Mahlobo, of course, speaking in his capacity as ANC NEC member. Thanks so much for joining us, sir. Appreciate it. Yesterday, you mentioned that you had intelligence reports on Vuwani before the incident occurred. This morning, you would have woken up to questions from media groups and South Africans about why you didn't act to prevent it if you had that intelligence.
Well, thank you very much, Anna. But we also have to thank all your viewers at home. Yesterday, you will remember when the question was asked. Our difficulty is that sometimes we ask questions with a limited appreciation on how the system works. If you are going to have an intelligence report, you are actually, it makes you to be able to decide on your deployment strategies. It also decides on how actually you can be able to do prosecution. And this is a question that has been asked all over again, and where you actually wanted to try to be able to actually blame certain people for certain things that you don't even understand how they actually work. If you have intelligence, does it mean that if people have not committed crime, you should be able to arrest? Our constitutional democracy doesn't work that particular way. And sometimes we ask this question without an appreciation, what is the terrain in that particular environment, even in terms of deployment. That area is very vast, is very bushy, and even in terms of traveling, is very difficult. But there is also a human element that we normally don't take into consideration. An element that begins to say that you know that if certain officers are coming from that particular locality, they actually try to do their best to keep us safe. But at the very same time, they're humans too. They are also subjected to intimidation. Looking at the history of the deployment of our forces on the ground, and most of the instances when there is a serious violence in particular areas, we actually even get to have people coming from other various parts of our country that assists to bring stability. In the early 90s, this is what used to happen. And sometimes we don't take into account the conditions where we actually operate, and then we actually quickly jump into be able to judge that this one, there is a failure or a lapse there. Where there are failures, we should be able to admit. But more important...
So that wasn't a failure?
If you wanted to actually look at it as an intelligence failure, the question is not actually looking broadly to say how the system actually works. Intelligence was provided, but from an operational point of view and in terms of deployment, what are the conditions that are there before people can actually make a judgment? Go to Vuwani, you'll be able to see that if you travel in those villages, one route, you have actually lot of plantation that is happening there. And people, when they are actually doing, they will actually do the burning from this side and go to the other side. Those are some of the issues. But probably that's why when we're saying yesterday, let's provide an opportunity that those people who are actually professionals in your field have an appreciation. How does a particular field work?
Now, if you look at it, though, 25 schools were burnt. If you have intelligence, you'd expect it to be used as a preventative measure. Was that not done at all in this case?
But you're also falling in the same trap, Sean. You're falling in the very same trap to actually understand that if you have intelligence information, what do you do? I said from an operation point of view, we have a risk assessment that is done. On the basis of risk assessment, which is intelligence, you decide on your deployment. Whether deployment was sufficient or not is issues that is debatable. And I was talking to you that most of those actual officers are local officers. Remember the level of violence that was happening there, the intimidation that people are being subjected to. The issue is to actually try to create headlines out of not understanding and appreciation what were the dynamics on the ground. Burning of any property there should be an issue that all of us should be able to condemn and be able to say probably all of us should have done more to be able to contain the situation because of the impact that it has in terms of the education of our children and the infrastructure that we need to be able to replace.
I don't think this is about making headlines or having sexy headlines. I mean, the question still is, what's the point of having intelligence if you're not going to use it to prevent an occurrence like that from happening?
But I was actually assisting you. Do you appreciate how do you do? If you have intelligence, what does our constitutional democracy say? If I know that you are actually planning something, you have not committed a crime, should we be able to arrest you? The answer is no. You will be able to say, we are using information, securitizing the state, and harassing our people. I'm saying that if you understand how it works, you gather intelligence. When you've got intelligence, you decide on the deployment. When you have decided on the deployment, if anything happens, then you are able to do the response. That's why I've always said and maintained it that if people don't appreciate the subject and you have no comprehension, you will be able always to try to find scapegoats. The reality is that violence and destruction of property is something that we've discussed. It must be condemned, put harsher sentences. And it's the security of this country is a responsibility for all of us to be able to ensure that we keep the nation secure.
Now, the issue with intelligence is that South Africans will always hear that the government or the ANC is saying we have intelligence that this is going to happen. We have intelligence of a regime change, a color regime change, that's an agenda that's being pushed. But then you don't tell us what sort of intelligence. And I know you would argue that you can't say who and why because that would defeat the purpose of intelligence. But making such strong and serious statements obviously leaves questions hanging.
But you should be able, if you remember, as I'm speaking on behalf of the ANC, that we actually have a collective view of our revolutionary theory, a document called Strategy and Tactics. It helps you to do an analysis in which we are waging your struggle in terms of our program of national democratic revolution. And if you are doing an assessment, it tells you what are the balance of forces, what are these motive forces that seeks to actually, that you need to mobilize so that we can be able to achieve our end goal. But also there are those people who are opposed to our own issues that we are trying to advance, to keep the status quo. When we raise these issues, why do we raise them? We want to raise them because we want to actually raise the issues of awareness so that our members, they are vigilant. They don't start to collaborate or unwittingly work with other forces that are actually seek to undermine. If you look at the world, every country has a national interest. It has national security imperatives. Other countries, they respect the world order in terms of the UN, in terms of the AU, that let's be able to actually cooperate for peace, for development, and for justice. But there will those be other people that will be able to push their national interests in a manner that seeks to undermine other countries. We have seen the issues that have happened in around the issues around the north of Africa. We have seen the issues around Syria. We have seen the issues around Iraq. And actually, even the issues that are happening in the region in terms of our own assessment, where former liberation movement, there's a move to say, you know what, we need to be able to actually stop their majority. And South Africa is not an exception. When we raise issues, we're not paranoid. We want to be able to ensure that our members, they have a political understanding and a political education to be able not to play along. But you will not be in a position when people have different views from the ANC. You start to target them, profile them to be able to say these are the people that are enemies of the state. You don't do that. But as long as they start to commit acts of espionage and acts of diversion, government has a responsibility to act.
Now, speaking intelligence reports, that was something that was used and cited as a reason for the dismissal of Pravin Gordhan and Mcebisi Jonas. When you were asked about it, you said that you did not have any information on that regard from 3 intelligence agencies. Do you have any more information on that now?
You know, you are making a mistake because you call me as a member of the NEC. I'm not speaking as a minister here. And we've responded to these issues. We're on record several times about the status of as government on how we're doing those particular issues. In other words, we can't be able to be smuggling issues that have nothing to do with the National Policy Conference. Because I'm not standing here as a Minister of Intelligence, but I'm here as a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, who was a rapporteur on the issues of peace and stability that we need to be able to communicate to the nation what are we doing. Intelligence information is an information that is handled in terms of its doctrine, is handled in terms of the laws of this particular country. If there is any person who feels aggrieved, there's an abuse and so forth, there are balance and checks that this democracy that we have actually brought in. Your constitution is there. It makes a provision of a creating of an institution like an office of an inspector general. It makes a provision of a committee like Joint Committee on Standing Committee on Intelligence, where the Minister of State Security, the Minister of Defense, around Defense Intelligence, Minister of Police in terms of crime intelligence, we all report there. But if people feel that the system are being abused, you can actually even write to those ministers to be able to raise issues. But I think those who are deployed in government, including myself, we have been able to deal with that matter as we have said in the past.
The reason I bring it up, and it's obviously because we've had other NEC members who've also sat there and openly spoken about their relevant portfolios in the administration. And that's why I bring up the intelligence report, which many would argue is still used on ANC members in this regard, ANC NEC members, to actually get them out of government positions. So can you tell us whether there was an intelligence report used in that decision or not?
But you can't also abuse me when I'm standing here as a member of the NEC. But I'm saying, in terms of assisting our South African society, if there are issues about rogue elements, people feel that they are being abused or the state is being used against them, this country, in terms of our democracy, it has created a balance and checks. These institutions are there. If I feel that my rights are being violated, I know where to go. As I've said, when it comes to matters of intelligence, go to the Inspector General. Go to the Joint Standing Committee of Intelligence. You can actually even go to the ministers, because there are 3 intelligence services in this country. But ultimately, they are even the courts here. If you feel that these other bodies that are not there, at least our democracy is strong. You cannot actually act willy-nilly in such a way that you undermine the rights and privileges that people are actually enjoying within the Bill of Rights.
So basically, you're not going to answer the question.
No, I've answered the question. The issue is that I should not answer the question the way you feel that it needs to satisfy you. Our duty is to communicate with the nation, educate them that their democracy works and our democracy is thriving. That's why our democracy is the envy of the world. No one can actually, your rights as an individual are protected by law. And that's why there's an institutional mechanism that we've provided. And when our institutions have weaknesses, people must be able to account. But when they're going to account, we should be able to say, if we are not satisfied, there is always a recourse.
Now, yesterday you said in your report that state capture was not spoken about specifically, but Gwede Mantashe in his diagnostic report and in that media briefing said that it would be discussed because it forms part of the economic transformation document. It's a question that would be relevant in this case.
Well, the good news is that the Economic Transformation Commission is coming to the plenary this morning. My understanding is that it's going to be the first one that we're going to discuss them. But we're discussing issues broadly as a Security, Peace and Stability Commission. We discuss issues of corruption. That is a cancer. That is actually that we need to be able to root wherever it raises ugly head, whether in business, whether in the public services that are there, we should be able to deal with it. But you know that the issues of the state capture, a decision has been made by the ANC NEC. I sit in the NEC. We've made a statement that that matter must be actually be dealt with in terms of the Judicial Commission, of which the President has actually communicated to the nation in Parliament, is establishing the commission. But if there are other issues that are being brought in that needs to be looked at, well, we'll hear at the President to say what are the terms in terms of reference of that particular commission. But we are also quite aware that there are these issues that are also being dealt with the public protector. There are other people who have put in a number of issues to the public protector to look at. But more important, the institution that needs to safeguard our democracy, the institution that needs to fight corruption, are actually working, and we need to support them and enhance them.
All right, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. ANC NEC member David Mahlobo, of course, also the Minister of State Security, but he's not willing to answer questions in that capacity.